I have a lot that I'd like to say at this point, and I felt that the only way to do this maybe would be through, making a video for both TikTok and YouTube. And this is a bit of an open letter to Sony as a company about something that's been on my mind for a while. I just got my Verizon bill just recently, and I'm gonna have to go switch providers simply because I my intention is to import a Sony Xperia when I decide to upgrade in the US market. I am disillusioned and pissed off, and not at you as a company, but in the direction that the smartphone market has been moving on hardware features for a while now. And Sony, with your phone, you touched a bit of a nerve. I'm not the customer that you would have expected to find or to capture, in the US market. I don't fit the image you have in mind of being a camera enthusiast, but, the fact is that the other manufacturers decided to engage in an outright conspiracy that depended on watertight cooperation between Samsung, Google, and Apple. And that conspiracy was one of trying to eliminate any option that allowed a customer to evade, if they ran out of storage space, having to be upsold on a higher capacity phone or be sold cloud storage services with them. They all of them decided to collude with each other in this, with the removal of, with Samsung's slow removal of the micro SD card slot, the removal of all of this from any one of the Android flagship phones and everything, and the forcing us over to these shitty Bluetooth headphones that no one really wanted all along, and Sony was the only party that didn't do this in the high end smartphone space. That wasn't, you know, it's like the buy-in cost of a brand new Xperia may be a lot higher than the other manufacturers, but the truth of the matter is that they're the only high-end player that isn't dicking people around and trying to push this conspiracy on them in the high-end space, on a flagship phone in the US market, and unfortunately the only way to evade this conspiracy and is to, is to the one hole that's been punctured in that um, conspiracy is all, and I'm fading out of video, because I'm heading between rooms at this point. But the only way to get around that is, with the fucking Sony Xperia. Pardon my French, by the way, but there's a lot of pent up frustration because Sam, Apple, all of them, Google, all of them have been doing this and everything, and it is really, I mean, it is ultimately a conspiracy. They may say that they've got their reasons other than money, but they're lying. It's all about the Benjamins. It's always been about the Benjamins. It's the only reason why they won't give us this feature set at all. And that's all it's ever been about with them and these soulless, soul sucking corporations and everything. And, I know Sony is not immune or remiss to profit or anything. It definitely wants it, but you were the one player that was honorable enough to not do this to us, and maybe there is a high bar to entry in terms of price, but I feel that for me, I buy refurbished. I like to save things from, the landfill, and, so I get a little bit off of that amount ultimately. But, I'm a member of Team Xperia. I'm using an Xperia 1, 5 for the time being. And yeah, I mean, in not so many words, domo arigato, Sony, for what you have done, bowing, and for being an honorable player in this, and you know, always supporting micro SD, you know, and anyways, I have heard the word on the street is that, T-Mobile is a little bit more willing to go with phones that are not, you know, as tested as other phones. And so, I'm not, I've got no plans to switch to another phone carrier or manufacturer's hardware. I'm not doing it. I'm not playing. I spent a lot of time literally begging, Samsung and Google to, Samsung in particular to bring back support for this, and Google to bring it to the Pixel for the very first time and everything. And not, my pleas fell on deaf ears and everything. They didn't care, or they would try to make excuses for it and justify it. And I didn't want to hear any of that. I don't care. I don't care what your justifications are. I don't want your excuses. I just want the features. I don't give a fuck why you won't do it, That don't care, And again, pardon my French. I just don't care. I don't want to be told, your justifications or excuses for this technology, because it was never a feature request. It was a threat. It was you will give me these features or I will take my business to somebody who will. And you, Sony, you happen to be that company that would.